What's up? Welcome back to the 182 News Podcast. This is your host, Poppin' Curbs, and I really appreciate you making me a part of your day. Today's episode, we have another special guest. This one is Mike Damante. So Mike is a music journalist. He's interviewed Blink tons of times. He's interviewed Skiba, even back with Alkaline Trio, several times, Tom, one-on-one. And I thought it would be cool to bring him on, not only to get that side of his stories, as you know, what it's like interviewing these dudes in a professional setting or backstage, stuff like that. But the other part that I really wanted to bring him on for is Mike is a UFO author. He's written several books on the subject. He is extremely well versed in the UFO phenomenon. Obviously, Tom is not in Blink, you know that, and obviously part of that reason is Tom is heavily pursuing this quote-unquote UFO stuff, you may think of it, and I wanted to have a deep conversation with somebody who's well-versed in this. I keep up with this really just being a Tom fan and huge To the Stars supporter, but it was cool to have a conversation with somebody who really has written books on the subject matter and who is a TTSA expert by every sense of the word, really. So the first part of this conversation is rad. We get some Blink stories. We kind of hear how he got into the band, what it's like interviewing the dudes. The latter half, I wanted to take a deep dive into really what Tom is trying to accomplish with TTSA, his approach to it. Maybe if you don't know about any of this, all of these franchises, what they're trying to do, where they're trying to go, stuff like that. I thought it would be interesting to focus on that for an episode, and I couldn't think of anybody better to have that conversation with than Mike. So I really hope you enjoy this conversation. Open your mind and think a little bit. We're getting weird on this. We're going to be talking aliens. We're going to be talking consciousness. We're going to be talking UFOs, stuff like that. So I know it's a little taboo. I know it might challenge your ways of thinking, as Tom puts it, but I thought it would be a fun episode, really just to have a chat, see where it goes, and at minimum, kind of give everybody a nice overview of what Tom is doing with To the Stars and To the Stars Academy right now. So I really hope you enjoy this. This is special guest Mike Damante. All right, ladies and gentlemen, now joining us on the 182 News Podcast, music journalist and UFO author Mike Damante. Mike, what's up, dude?
Nothing much, man. Thank you so much for having me on. I know we talked about doing this for a while, and I said earlier off the air that your podcast is one of the only ones I listen to. I'm on a ton of them for like my UFO stuff, but as a Blink fan, I think you do a great job of just covering so many important eras of the band and as well. So for me, it's always a pleasure to listen. So thank you for having me on. I'm stoked.
Hell yeah, dude. No, appreciate you coming on. We've been talking about this for a bit. I've been looking forward to it. So along the lines of the Blink stuff, let's just kick off with that. I want to hear a little bit about how you got into Blink, how your fandom sort of started. I mean, you've got a ton of Blink tats and stuff, obviously, big fan of the band. So tell us a little bit how you got into Blink in the first place.
So so I grew up in New York, and between moving from New York to Texas, I lived in Pennsylvania for like half a year. And I really didn't have any friends. I was like, kind of a outcast or whatever. And I had one friend. We used to play like Dungeons and Dragons and do like all this nerdy stuff together. And he gave me like this couple of CDs one day. And it was like old school emo, like Juliana Theory, like Get Up Kids. And there was Blink, Cheshire Cat. And I listened to it, and like there was something about it that resonated with me. I just couldn't put my finger on it. It was like when I was a kid, I heard the Ramones. I saw the Ramones on TV. Like I didn't get it, but there was something like in my head, like this is cool, but I don't know what's cool about it yet. So the first time I heard like Carousel, it was like that same feeling. It's like I don't know what it's about this music, but it's something. And then obviously Dude Ranch came out, and that's like my favorite record of all time. So that's how my fandom got started. Really, like when Dude Ranch came out, I'm an older guy. I'm like in my late 30s, so I'm a 90s guy. So like 90s alternative rock, like ska, and like the punk back then was like all I listened to. So when Dude Ranch came out, that was truly like a great era of music. And Then yeah, obviously, the band kind of took off from there, and my fandom just kind of grew, and even before I started, doing journalism at the college level and then professionally, I was a fan of the band, and go to shows and try to meet them afterward and stuff. So that's how I kind of got started with the Blink fandom.
Dope. Yeah. So you just mentioned it. You end up going on to get into the journalism field. You've done several interviews with Blink, Angels and Airwaves, and we're going to probably post some of these, or I'll at least point people. I know you have them up on your YouTube or somewhere. So I know you've done backstage with Tom. You've done Blink a couple times. You've done Skiba 4 or 5 times. So how do you get to that point in your journalism career, and what's it like interviewing these dudes backstage?
So before I even got started in journalism, this is kind of how I got my foot in the door, even before journalism. It was at an Angels and Airwaves show. It was their first tour. They were opening for Taking Back Sunday. And I mean, I was a huge fan. I never met anyone in the band yet. But, back then I was a little punk rock kid. I used to like hang out after shows. And I always liked, because they're like your heroes, like you want to meet your heroes. And always had good experiences in the punk rock world. I'm a huge Alkaline Trio fan as well. And I just remember they would always come out, no matter how big they were. They'd always come out and meet their fans. So I think that's part of, kind of being in a punk rock bands in that community is like, the aspect that they're really cool. They're down to earth. So after the Angels and Airwaves show, I was just kind of hanging out like in the back, and Guitar Tech came out, or a stagehand, and he had like the badge on and he was official. And I just started talking to him, and like he saw I had like a Angels and Airwaves and like a Blink tattoo. And he was like, "Hey, you want to meet the band?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." Like, so he's like, "I'll be right back." He goes in, comes out with like passes for me, and my friend. He brings us inside to like this, almost like this cafeteria. Actually, come to think about it, it's the same place I ended up interviewing Tom a couple years after this. But anyway, so he brings me and my friend back there, and we're just like waiting. And then Ryan Sin walks in. And he's like, "Hey, you guys want to?" He introduces himself, and I knew Ryan was from the Distillers, and he was Ava's first bass player, and he's like, "Yeah, come on down." And he took us through the hallway, and Tom came up first, and first thing Tom looked at my tattoos. I showed him like my Blink one, and he didn't even care. He really liked my Alkaline Trio and my Screeching Weasel tattoo better, which is kind of funny.
That's funny.
And we just started talking, like we took pictures, and then like hung out with the rest of the band. We're just like chilling in like this space where the band was just. It was after the show, and they were just hanging out. And at one point, I was sitting on a couch with Rick DeVoe and Tom, and Tom was just trying to like entertain us. He was like air drumming and like trying to make us feel at home, like backstage, which was really cool. And I just remember Rick DeVoe was super nice. I don't know if I exchanged emails with him. I don't know exactly what happened, but years down the line, when I started doing like press stuff, he remembered me. Which you always think, are these people ever going to remember you?
Yeah.
I've met Blink and zillion times and interviewed them. I don't think they remember, but it's like they meet people.
Me either.
So it's So fast forward, Warp Tour. Ancient Airways is playing Warp Tour, and that year they did Mod Life. They had the little Mod Life bus, and I was covering it for the Daily Cougar, which was the University of Houston newspaper. So they had the Mod Life thing, and I went up to the thing and said, "Hey, I'm a reporter. I'm doing a story. I'd like to take some pictures." And the guy's like basically stopped me and says, "Say no more." And he gave me he slapped like a VIP badge on me, which was really cool. So I got to like do the meet and greet with Tom and the band, and then Chris, Tom's old manager, Angels and Airwaves old tour manager, he recognized me from a previous show. He says, "Hey, you want to watch the band on stage?" I'm like, "Sure." And I told him who I was, and I was like, "Hey, I'd love to interview the band one day." And he's like, "Yeah, man, we'll make that happen someday." And I wasn't thinking anything of it, I just thought he was being nice. So I was gonna tell you this funny story. So I'm on stage waiting to watch Angels and Airwaves play, and I get someone taps on my shoulder, and I look down, and it's Haley Williams, and she's like, "Hey," "Have you seen Chad?" Like her boyfriend at the time from Newfound Glory. Like I would know, and I was like, "Yeah, I think he's over there." And then she's like, "Okay, thank you." And I'm like, "Holy shit, that was Haley Williams!" Like, nice. It's like just crossing the stage to try to find Chad, who was going to probably watch Angels and Airwaves too. So yeah, so then I think it's that next October, because that was right when Angels and Airwaves, they were touring nonstop. They did Warp Tour, then they did the Weezer tour. So I pitched doing an interview to Chris and Tom's team, because I was like, hey, I don't know if you remember me. I work for the school newspaper. And I mean, college newspapers surprisingly get a lot of press opportunities because of the demographic. So many of those bands back then, their target audience was college kids.
Oh, that's a good point.
So yeah, so like, and I think they remembered me too, and like, oh yeah, he seems nice or whatever. Doesn't seem like creepy or anything. So yeah, it was backstage. It was me. I got about 10 minutes with Tom, and it was great. Like Tom was super awesome. I think I the video I videoed it. It was really bad quality, but it's up. It's on my Vimeo on YouTube, and yeah, Tom just does a really good job of not only answering questions, but promoting what he's doing, and he gets you excited about it too. His energy, and he does a good job of making you feel at home too. Anytime you meet him, regardless of whether he remembers you or not, like there's something genuine about when you like kind of sit down with him. So yeah, so that was kind of how I started interviewing the band. So this is when Blink was broken up. This is when obviously Angels and Airwaves was in full force and as well. So yeah, and then the other interviews I've done. I'm trying to think chronologically.
Yeah.
When they did the reunion tour, I did a phoner with Tom, which is over the phone, which is always cool. And Chronicle ended up making it the front page story of the entertainment section. So, which was really cool. So I had a front page Blink story because they really didn't cover that type of music. Like we had so I was on the copy desk mostly. I would copy edit other stories, and we had two main music writers, but they covered we had one guy who would cover indie, and then another person would cover kind of mainstream and pop music. No one really covered alternative or punk. So whenever there was an opportunity, they would let me write about it. So I was like, hey, I'd love to do this Blink story. I could get it set up, and they're like, sure. And then I found out they wanted to, it to be the cover because it was at the time this was a huge tour, it was their reunion tour as well. So that show was pretty cool because I signed up to do street team for Macbeth, handing out flyers, and I was able to give James, who was Tom's tour manager at the time, the article to then give to him. So yeah, it was that show, and then I think the next time I interviewed them was right when Neighborhoods was coming out. It was a conference call, so it was myself and about 8 other reporters from all over the country, and it was a Mark and Tom, and that was probably one of my favorite interviews with them because I had the first question. And I hit him with a hardball question. And I think it kind of took Mark by surprise because it was remember, Neighborhoods took forever to come out. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because Mark was living in the UK. Tom had the Love movie coming out. Travis had I think Give the Drummer Some was in the works. So my first question was with all these side projects, is Blink the priority? And he was like, yes, Blink. He goes, yes, Blink is the priority. Right away. It was a good answer. But yeah, so for me, that was one of my favorite interviews because that was one of my favorite eras of the band. Was oddly enough was the tour cycle in Neighborhoods through Dog Eating Dogs. It's probably one of my top eras of the band. And it's a weird. I know a lot of fans would disagree, but I think that period was great. Yeah, then I interviewed Travis over the phone when they were doing. He was doing his solo tour opening for Lil Wayne to preview that, and then I did Blink X Games, which was probably one of the coolest experiences professionally for me because I covered X Games before. In previous years, it was I think it was Kanye West and Bad Religion, and then who was it? I can't remember who the other years were, but obviously Blink covering X Games was just perfect. It was this last year in Austin. And I didn't even know I had the interview till the day before. I already had press coverage to, shoot photos of the show and review it. But just oh man, it was, I guess because ESPN, Disney, there was just so many moving parts. And that day they only did, as my interview, because it was Houston Chronicle, because it's, Texas and all the other Texas Hearst properties. And they did maybe a 5-minute video thing for ESPN, or not even 5 minutes, a 2-minute promo for ESPN, and that was it. So that was really rad. Probably one of the coolest interviews. That was right before California was coming out too. So, which weirdly enough, so the way they had the press area set up was really nice. And I'm sitting there, they're playing music, and it's this sounds like Blink. And it was actually played 2 new songs through the thing, but no one knew it was Blink. And it was I don't know if they were doing that just to mess with people. Yeah. But it was funny. I can't remember which way they were. I think it was maybe Bohemian Rhapsody, which I think just came out, and
Oh
then
shit.
another one from California that wasn't released yet. They were just kind of
Okay.
playing in the media. But yeah, the interview itself was rad. It was basically just talking about X Games and the new album, and yeah, yeah, that's probably one of the coolest interviews I was
Do
able to
you
do with
get
them.
debriefed or anything before them, or do they just roll up and you just hit them and then they bounce?
So what they said before the X Games interview was no Tom questions.
I was gonna say, I just mentioned this on the pod the other day. I'm like,
Yeah,
if I was their PR guy or somebody, or if I was them, I would say no Tom questions, none.
yeah,
And it's not even like I love Tom. If I was Tom, I would say the same fucking thing for his interviews. I would say no blink questions. And I think
yeah.
people hit him with them either way. I mean, I was just curious about that because I'm thinking, surely to God, someone is going to tell the people interviewing ahead of time.
Yeah, because I think that time it was right around, I mean, it was right. California was coming out, so I think they wanted everything to be focused on that, and X Games
Oh,
was a
for
big
sure.
deal. But, like, I get it, and I told him absolutely, I didn't have any planned.
Yeah, yeah. Well, true fans like us, we would
Yeah,
have more respect to not hit them with that bullshit. But when they go on all these stupid shows that people, have no clue, they hit them with it instantly. It always cracks me up. But I mean, people are still asking it 5 years later. I just heard one the other day. It's nuts. But a couple points in regards to what you were talking about. One, you were talking about the dude with the who worked with the band who kind of hooked you up just by talking to him. For one, I cannot even begin to explain how many times that has worked out in my favor. If you're just fucking cool with people who work with the band or the stagehands or the techs, I'm telling you to the listeners, that will get you some rad shit. It's happened to me so many times, and I'm not gonna give away all my connections on this shit, but you can get some cool shit that way. Number two, Ryan Sin, original bass player, he's supposed to be coming on the pod. He's down, so that'll be an interesting combo. And same with Rick DeVoe. He said he's down, so I can't wait for that one. That's going to be fucking insane. So, but yeah, back to the interviewing stuff. So you do the X Game one. That one was in person, right?
correct. Yeah, that was backstage, basically right before, maybe like an hour and a half before they went on. But yeah, that was
Jeez.
one of the best experiences. X Games is a blast to begin with. It's really cool to watch the action sports, and it was one of their best sets. Like, I think I put in my review, it was one of their best early shows with Skiba ever. The
Okay.
set list was great. It was very fitting for X Games. They played a lot of older songs like Josie, and that was the first time they ever played Not Now live, which shocked me because I never thought they would play that without Tom. And then I
Uh,
slowly realized that no songs were off limits.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, they were playing some deep cuts on that first California stretch with Skiba Man. I mean, I've got one of the set lists right behind me. They played fucking Eminem's at mine, Not Now. I mean, Reckless Abandon. They played some cool sets initially. So, didn't you also cover one of Matt's first shows? Like, was it the Music one?
Yeah, so that year was my birthday. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna treat myself. Music fell on my birthday,
Oh,
and
sick.
my friends are already going. So I was like, well, I already paid for tickets for one day. Let me see if I can get pressed for the other days too. Because I mean, Bad Religion was playing Friday, and Bad Religion's my third favorite band. It's Blink, Alkaline, and Bad Religion.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, so I was able to get press coverage to shoot their set, and honestly, it was a hard get because I mean, I was someone outside of California wanting to cover it. But the guy I worked with him before, covering some of the other artists, so he was familiar with me, so it wasn't a problem. So that was a great experience, and it's funny, like small world. I get there and I'm talking to the merch guy, and it wasn't Chris. It was his assistant at the time. I
Okay.
think his name was Mike, and we were talking. I was like, "Yeah, I'm here from Houston," and he knew somebody I worked with. He knew one of the sports reporters
Oh,
at
shit.
the Chronicle, and I was like, "Wow, small world."
Yeah.
So years later, this guy Mike, I meet him again because my buddy Jeff is the Descendants tour manager, and he does the
Oh.
merch for the Descendants now. And I was like, "Hey, you look familiar," and he was the same guy. He used to be Chris's assistant. But anyway, yeah, music was really cool. That show specifically because they played those two shows, those little warm up shows in I think San Diego and LA leading up to it. But this was like the first like big show with Skiba.
Yeah.
And I know you're a big fan of Skiba and you support him. You're an Alkaline Trio fan too. Like you get it. So
Yeah.
I was a big fan of him. And like a lot of Blink fans were kind of me too. We were a little, what's this going to look like live? I mean, the set list was great. And the funny thing was before that, I think we had like my friends had VIP tickets that day, and it was like free drinks, food, and like a backstage area. But it really wasn't. It was you're just kind of like chilling. And the friends I was with, like they're huge Travis fans, and we saw Travis like 20 feet away with their publicist, who I never met in person, but I obviously communicated with her for interviews and for press and stuff. And I didn't want to like yell her name out or say
I
hi, nice to
know.
meet you. So it's like, oh, Travis left, and then next like Mark starts walking out a minute later, and we're like, hey Mark, and like he came out, he's really nice. He took pictures with us. We didn't get talk to him too much, but told him, hey, it's my birthday. We came up here from Houston, and he was really cool. So then we're going in the show. We're walking in like basically almost behind Mark, and Toby from H2O was right there too. So it's like back to back with
Nice.
Mark and Toby. Just so that was pretty cool. The way they had music, it was very that area was very you almost felt like you're backstage. Obviously you weren't behind the barrier, but yeah, the whole experience was great. And like I said, going out of town to cover a show for me, even though it was on my own dime, it was still kind of
Yeah.
a thing to do.
Yeah, that's gosh, I need to get a fucking photo pass if concerts ever return. It's funny, I was this is funny actually. So Angels and the New Regime were supposed to be playing at I think it was called Bunbury Festival this summer. It's in Cincinnati. So I'm in the Midwest and usually I catch these guys in either St. Louis, Nashville, Indy, or like Cincinnati is a little bit of a further drive. But anyways, this is right when I launched the podcast when these got announced a little bit earlier this year. And I was looking at the site for tickets and shit, and I saw it was like press passes or like press inquiries or something. And so I clicked on it and I just like put this bullshit email together about how I'm like my own news organization, 182 News, that I like provide this coverage. And I was hoping that I would get a photo pass. Now I never heard back from them, so I don't know if that's because it got canceled because of COVID or if I just didn't meet the cut. But I'm hoping I can do that sometime because I think I'd be sick, dude. Like, I mean, you're right there in the trenches, just right up front, able to take as many fucking photos as you want.
Yeah, like it's weird. Like so when you do it for a while, sometimes it's like, oh, I gotta go shoot a set. I gotta carry my camera. But if it's like a band you love, it's like I get to watch the first three songs, in the pit. The
Yeah.
only thing that sucked, like during the Enema tour, they didn't have pit photography.
Okay.
We had to shoot from the sound stage, which was like hundreds of feet away, which kind of sucked. But that was just the setup. I think that was because of Little Wayne. Remember, Little Wayne had on that the Enema tour, he had like VIP pit seats where they basically set up seats in the pit.
Oh,
So I
yeah.
think they used the photo pit for that, which was kind of crappy, but oh well, can't
By the
complain.
way, yeah, when you're shooting up front, I was thinking about this. I'm not a professional photographer by any means. I can kind of get a decent shot with my crappy little Nikon if I need to, but you're supposed to turn your flash off, right? If you're up front taking pictures.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Usually flash off first three songs. Some bands are a little bit cooler with it. Third Eye Blind is really cool because like their last couple of Summer Gods tours, they start the first three songs like in the dark. So they're
Oh,
like, you can come to the photo pit, but you can stay there for six songs because the first three you can't get any good shots. So that's pretty cool. Like that's a band that like realizes the photographer's job.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, yeah, they're cool with it. Yeah, it depends on the band, but usually it's like a general rule: first three songs, no flash, and then you're out.
Okay, yeah, I didn't realize that was a 3 song limit. That's interesting. So, yeah, I need to go to music, man. I've been wanting to go, the past 4 or 5 years when Travis was hyping it up, and especially when Blink's playing. I'd love to go out there, and it seems like a lot of people either just catch Travis just walking through the crowd and get to say what up, or I know he does like the meet and greets and shit. Like, did you meet him before any of those or run into him?
Not at music. So I met Travis at X Games when I interviewed him. When he did the Little Wayne show in Houston, I got to meet him in between his set. He basically just did like it was crazy. He did like it was like not even like advertised ahead of time. They just got on the loudspeaker and they're like, meet Travis Barker, get a professional photo in the concessions right now for $25. I'm like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah,
And at the
yeah,
time, I
that's.
was like, that was the only guy in Blink I haven't met yet at the time. So I was like, oh, I gotta
Oh,
get
really?
this. Yeah, but Travis is probably like one of the harder ones to interview. Just because like he's quiet and he's kind of intimidating, but once you get him going,
Yeah,
like at X Games, like he had his sunglasses on, like the whole time I couldn't like look him in the eye, I didn't know what he was like feeling. But as soon
yeah.
as I put like the microphone in his face, like he gave me really good answers. And I remember when I interviewed him to preview the Little Wayne show, I asked him about Ghost on the Dance Floor because that was a song that leaked. or the title leaked, and like I think a lot of fans like I asked him, hey, is this about people passing? Was this anything to do with like Chris GJM? And he was really impressed that I knew that that song existed because it was like one of those like little insider things, I guess, or only
Yeah.
like hardcore fans knew. But yeah, like once you get him to open up, I think Travis gets good answers. Also, X Games. I think when we were doing the interview was when UFC was happening, and I know he was a big UFC fan, so he was missing. I think like the first round of fights to do the interview, so he's probably just like, like getting a little anxious, like okay, like
Yeah, I gotta
let's
get
wrap
the
this
fuck
up
out of
so
here.
I can.
That's funny, man. So, did you get to catch Blink with Tom? I mean, in their heyday, or towards the end?
Yeah, so I'm kicking myself for this. I didn't go to concerts in high school, so like I missed Blink playing at the Smalls Club in Houston, and I also missed them playing with Bad Religion when they did the Anima tour. So I missed that. But like,
Mm.
the Take Off Your Pants and Jacket, Pop Disaster tour, the Untitled record tour, and the Untitled record was when I told you I had a cool story about Mark's bass. That tour when it was them taking back Sunday in Cypress Hill. This is before I did any press stuff. This was just me getting lucky as a fan. I ended up that day trading my tickets and paying somebody like $100 to get pit tickets. So I was like, 'cause I never seen them in pit before. So during that tour, they did a medley of all their older songs. They put like it was like Dumply, Eminem's, Josie, Man Overboard. I think that's it. They did a medley of that since they played so many songs off Untitled. So during that medley, you're in the pit. Sometimes you make eye contact, and being a little fanboy. Hey, Mark, look at my Blink tattoo, and he kind of like gave me a look, like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
Then after the set, he just handed me his bass, and I was like,
Oh
what?
shit.
So I met him after that, and I've interviewed him. Like he doesn't remember. Like I think at the Plus 44 show in Houston, I met him backstage. It wasn't an interview. I just kind of met him. I just kind of got back there, or no, I wasn't back there. He was just walking through the parking lot when I was. So it was kind of one of those chance meetings. And I was like, hey, Mark, do you remember last time you played over Blink? You gave me your bass, and he's like, no. I mean, that's rad though, but no.
I wonder how many of those he gave away. I mean, this was when he was probably getting a ton from Fender. Do you still have it?
Oh, absolutely. It's probably like my prized Blink possession.
Sick.
I've sold some other Blink stuff that's probably worth money too, but that one, he played. It was it's like the light bluish one,
Yeah.
and he would use it to play the encore on that tour. So it was
Damn.
Stockholm Syndrome, Down, and Damn It was what was played on it.
Yeah, we'll have to post a picture of that. That's sick. Have you ever thought about asking him to sign it? Or I mean, it's hard to get a guitar somewhere in front of him.
Yes, it's hard. Like, I'm not a big autograph guy. I'm more of a picture guy because I
Okay.
like memories. So I always like getting pictures with them rather something signed. In terms of like memorabilia, like signing stuff, I think when I went to Wine Amplified, that was another kind of spur of the moment Blink trip. That was the last show with Tom.
Oh
And that's
shit.
probably one of my all-time favorite shows because like they had a really good set list. They played stuff off Dogs Eating Dogs. They covered one of my favorite Misfits songs. And it was like seeing them at that festival was really cool. And like that day, so I told you I had a bunch of crazy stories. If I'm talking too much, just stop
No,
me.
you're good, man. I want to hear them all.
So my friends were going up there because they travel to see Blink like every year. They sometimes they'll bring their kid, and there's like hardcore fans like we are. So I was like, at the last minute, I decided to go. I was like, I'm gonna go. They're like, sure. I've never been to Vegas, so the show is Saturday. Friday, my flight gets it was supposed to go up through Minnesota to down to Vegas, something ridiculous. So it got canceled because of like a storm. Like, look, I need to get there tomorrow. I told them, I'm working this. I wasn't working it. So I ended up getting, luckily enough, I got thrown on a first class flight to Utah, and then I had to fly out of Utah at 5 in the morning to get to Vegas. And I just remember my hotel room was 138, which is a Misfits song. So I thought that was kind of a
A
nice little
sign.
omen. So yeah, I went straight from the airport to the mall because Travis was doing like a meet and greet and signing, and that was the coolest Travis ever was in person. He greeted, talked to every fan. He signed. I had the Feeling This slash Violence vinyl single. I just had
Yeah.
him autograph that real quick, and we got pictures with him, and we're talking. And it was right before they were supposed to play. Blink was supposed to play a festival in Houston that got shut down because it was a scam. Like the dude was like shady. Like he didn't pay any of the band's guarantees, and it basically just crumbled. And I was talking to Travis about that. And he like legit was like bummed. He's like, yeah, I was really looking forward to playing in Houston because like he has family in Texas, and obviously he has a lot of friends in the hip hop community in Texas too. And like it was like, it wasn't an interview, we were just talking. Like he legit seemed like disappointed that show wasn't happening. And yeah, so that show was probably one of the coolest because it was Tom's last show with Blink.
Man, that's a pretty good memory to have. I mean, who would have thought at the time? But I mean, I'm like you. I really like that neighborhoods, dogs eating dogs era has a sweet spot in my heart. I mean, I really dug that stuff. I've mentioned it before. I mean, my favorite band was back, so it definitely has a sweet spot for me. That's dope. Was Travis's meet and greet at like a Tilly's or like a mall store or something?
Yeah, it was at a
Is it?
Tilly's. And
Okay.
it was funny. We were in line. We were just talking to people, talking to fans, and this girl we were talking to, she got Travis's signature on her arm,
Yeah.
and she was gonna go get it tattooed. And we ended up going with her. And the guy who tattooed her was the bass player for TSOL,
Okay.
Mike Roach. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So another cool like little punk rock story associated with it. But I was gonna say, but yeah, that whole era, like the whole neighborhoods through dog eating dogs, and it's like that time in the band's life, I really felt like they had control. Because they were doing things that previously I felt like they didn't do before. They were doing the small club shows. Remember, like in Brooklyn, they played like one of the smallest venues in New York. They're doing these small club shows. They were doing these things that, like, they actually felt like. I mean, in interviews with them too, I think Tom said something like when I interviewed him, like, we have the power back now. So I almost felt like their label was like kind of very like, well, they're on Interscope, and Interscope at the time didn't care about rock music. So like, with everything that happened with neighborhoods, they didn't promote it much,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so when they did Dogs Eating Dog on their own, I was like, man, this is them finally putting out something independent. First time they've really done that on their own, no
Right.
label. And I love Dogs Eating Dogs. It was dope. Like, I thought Neighborhoods was great too. I thought Neighborhoods was everything that they said California was going to be. Because I felt like Neighborhoods had throwback songs. It also sounded like the band progressing and as well. So I love that record. And that whole era, like I said, they played dope shows. Like that the Wine Amplified show, Tom's last show with them. Those set lists were great. Like they seemed like, even though this was right before Tom left, it seemed like they were having fun. Like they were covering like Misfits. They were, working in older songs in the sets, and it just felt like they were in control of their like destiny.
Yeah, it's kind of sad that really, and I don't know if it's just because of the Tom situation, but like they've almost written off that entire era at this point, which is kind of sad. It's almost like Mark and Travis. I don't know, maybe the memories of that era just aren't as pleasant, but they don't even play any of it in the set list anymore, most recently. So it's kind of sad looking back. Speaking of the autographed tattoos, did you have them sign you or no? I see that
No,
happen. Okay.
I've never had them do that. No.
I see that happen quite a bit, and I'm so torn on it because one, it's like I don't know if I want a dude like signing my body, and two, it's like I don't know if I want a random dude's name on my body. I guess it's cool if you've got like a whole Blink, piece or something that might be cool. But it's funny. I have the "Hi, my name is Mark" octopus is like my entire rib cage. And it fucking hurt. I don't like rib tattoos that much. I love getting tattooed. It's awesome, but God, the ribs hurt. Anyways, it's funny. The first time I met Mark, I was like so excited to show it to him. And I see all these people showing him their tattoos, in front of me in line. I'm like, they're probably so fucking sick of this. Like, it's so annoying. And then for me, I get up there, I'm like, Mark. And then I'm basically a dude flashing a dude, like pulling up my shirt with like my hairy ass chest. It's like, as soon as I get done, I was like, I shouldn't have done that. That's kind of weird. But I don't know. He seemed like he liked it. They're immune to it at this point. They just kind of nod, smile. Yeah, it looks cool, and then they instantly forget about it. So it's whatever. Okay, you've interviewed Matt several times. Big Alkaline Trio fan. Is there anything you need to mention about that? And then next we're going to get into some To the Stars stuff.
So yeah, Matt, probably one of the nicest guys you can meet in music for years. And like I said earlier, I know you're a big fan of Alkaline Trio and supportive of what he's been doing with Blink. Yeah, Matt, I mean, back in Alkaline Trio days, I interviewed him many times at like Warped Tour, Houston shows. A buddy of mine used to be his guitar tech for a while, so
Oh shit.
I actually helped. Yeah, I actually helped facilitate a coworker proposing to Alkaline Trio, proposing on stage during an Alkaline Trio show. And one of the better Skiba stories I had was me and my buddy went to California. We went to LA and San Diego. We actually went to Macbeth, and we toured the Macbeth thing. So we were in LA because I have friends who work at Epitaph, and we went to lunch that day with like the Menzingers and the Bouncing Souls were playing that night, and I love that band. So like, yeah, we'll get you guys in for free. I'm like, oh, so much. So I said to my friend, hey, I bet you we see Matt Skiba tonight. Like, no, we're not. So we're walking up to the venue, and Matt Skiba's outside.
Oh shit.
And I go, oh man, there's Matt Skiba. And like he was talking to a guy, and I felt bad because it seemed like they were having like a legit like heart to heart conversation. I was like, hi, I'm sorry to bother. And I was talking, I was like, hey, I'm a big fan. And then Matt looks at me right away. He goes, hey, aren't you from Houston? What are you doing here? Like he made the association.
Oh, nice.
Which was really cool. Yeah, Matt Skiba is a great guy. During the Blink shows, I don't think he remembers me anymore. It's been a while since those Ackline show days, and his brain's probably, from maybe a lot of years. From a lot of years of being in a band and stuff. But the last Blink show, the Enema tour, when we did the meet and greet, I brought my wife with me, and I told him, hey, Every Doug Needs a Lady was our wedding song. And Mark thought that was really cool. Mark thought that was like the coolest thing, like more so than Matt. Matt's like, oh man, that's cool. And Mark was like, turned to Matt, like, man, did you hear that? Like, whoa, like,
yeah.
So yeah, Matt Skiba has always been a class act. For me, I just wish like he was utilized more in the band. I feel like they don't utilize his talent because, I mean, his songwriting. I mean, if you listen to the last Ackline record, their last EP, like he still has it. Is this thing? It's great. So.
Yeah, that record's amazing. I know a lot of people we're waiting for Skiba to get, to just let loose, release Skiba. We're getting there. I mean, he had No Heart to Speak Of. He had Black Rain. So I mean, I'm hoping with his 9 Deluxe or something, they're just getting a little bit more comfortable with him and starting to fire on all cylinders. But yeah, for anybody who, I mean, I haven't heard really anything bad about people who have met Skiba. I've heard, bad stories if you catch people on the wrong day a lot of times with athletes or celebrities. Sometimes it doesn't go your way or you can get ignored. But I mean, Skiba, every time I've met him, every time I've seen people who have met him, he is just as cool as it gets. So it's part of why I'm always rooting for him and appreciate him. And yeah, for the listeners who don't know Alkaline Trio or listen to Alkaline Trio, good God, go back and dig into their discography because it's incredible. All right, man. Well, this is what I'm super excited for with you because clearly this is right up your alley. I want to get into some of the To the Stars stuff. I want to get deep into the TTSA stuff. So for a lot of the listeners, a lot of you are either mad or you miss Tom and maybe you don't know what's going on. And this is where I really want to get people up to speed with something that really Tom is incredibly passionate about. So right away, this is going back 4 or 5 years. He launches To the Stars. Now, To the Stars initially, and still is, really an umbrella for what he considers all these different franchises. And within the To the Stars umbrella, there are several different things. There's like Poet Anderson, for instance. And so Poet Anderson has comics and an animation. They're supposed to be working on a live action film. Then he has Cathedrals of Glass. Initially, part of what fell under this UFO, the alien umbrella, is this franchise called Secret Machines. So Secret Machines initially is split into, basically think of it as 2 different sides. There is the fiction, which is the supposedly fake stuff. Then there's the nonfiction, the non-fake stuff. So the plan was, and we're in the middle of this now, 4 or 5 years later, there's going to be 3 fiction books written by A.J. Hartley. So the first one was Chasing Shadows. What was cool about this, and a lot of people didn't really grasp this or they just thought it was a New Angels EP, but part of what he's been doing with these little franchises initially is he's been tying in different forms of media. So with Poet Anderson, he released that Of Nightmares EP, which is like the companion to that book. Experimental rad EP. The Poet Anderson series in general is pretty cool. It's a neat idea. It's a interesting concept. I enjoy them. Well, The Secret Machines, book 1, the fiction book comes out, Chasing Shadows. And along with that comes the accompanying EP, which a lot of people were really into that EP. I love that EP. It's dope. Recently, book 2 of that came out, which is called A Fire Within. I have not had a chance to read that. I haven't had a chance to dig into that. Then on the other side of this, in the nonfiction world, these are written by Peter Levenda. And there's God, Man, and War are the 3 books that are going to come out. God is already out. Man came out not too long ago, and then War is going to drop at some point, probably in the next year or so. So Tom's thinking behind this is, he's deep into these conversations with, sectors of the government and people who have worked on this stuff, studied this stuff for a long time. The way Tom thinks of this is in the fiction world, a lot of people are like, well, if Tom knows all these secrets, why doesn't he just come out and tell us? Tom's response to that is, for one, we're not really ready. For two, it's kind of scary and it challenges really a lot of things, religion, ideology, a grand amount of weird things. And so what he has done in the fiction thing is he has basically sprinkled tidbits of what he says are loosely based factual information into the fiction books. So, for example, book number 1, Chasing Shadows, great book. Even if you don't believe any of it, that's a great book. I mean, I've said this before. A.J. Hartley, who wrote the fiction series and Cathedrals of Glass, he's an incredible author. He's a Shakespearean professor. He's badass. So, for example, in book number 1, there is the mention of an aircraft. It's the Astra TR-3B. Is that right? Okay. So this is an anti-gravity triangle-shaped device, or UFO, and one of the characters in this is essentially asked to learn this vehicle and fly this vehicle and test this vehicle. Now, in the book, this is supposedly a fictional book, but according to Tom and his game plan of kind of sprinkling this info in, it's very real. In fact, I asked Tom when that book came out on Instagram, I said, how real is the story on the Astra TR-3B? And he put hashtag very real. So he definitely, from his advisors or these group of people that he's put together from different segments of the government or engineers or space and science, he gets these little sprinkles of information, and what he's doing is he's kind of putting them in these books, and that is his way of kind of spreading this information. Now, whether you want to buy into that or not, that's up to you. I'm just telling you how Tom is thinking about it. Now, on the flip side of that, he has the nonfiction, which this is basically almost like a scientific view on things. It's very scholarly and by the book. I mean, it's no bullshitting on this. And so Peter Levenda, who's extremely well known in his field, and I'll let you talk on him a little bit more because he's actually in your book. He wrote Gods initially. And so when I read Gods, to be honest, that one was kind of hard for me to wrap my head and get through. I mean, it really is almost like a scholarly novel of just a huge report, and it's combining quite a lot of concepts, and it's just deep, man. That one was kind of hard for me to get through just from I don't know. It was hard for me to stay on top of that one. Now, Man, which is book number 2 that I'm currently in the middle of reading right now, I'm really enjoying Man. I think it's great. So book 1 gets really deep into like religious philosophy, but it also touches base on like ancient symbolism, and there was some interesting stuff in there. I mean, just shit you don't really think about, like, paintings on the cave in a wall 5,000 years ago, and in some of those paintings there is an airplane or a flying saucer, and it's like, well, what the fuck is that? How did that pop in their brains for them to paint on a wall out of blood or something like that? It's interesting. But some of the stuff I wanted to point out about Man that has been interesting to me, some of the themes, is right away I thought this was interesting. Maybe UFOs don't have operators. So we always assume that these space people come down and it's just a little green person sitting in there, with his foot on the pedal. But when you think about it, it's like, they don't have to have an operator. Nobody said they have to have somebody in there. I thought that was interesting for one. Another one that I thought was interesting theme I've taken away from this book is even NASA scholars are saying that communication with these other beings would be impossible. It would be fucking impossible. So people always imagine these people come down and we just magically sync up and have a little chat. That's not the way it's gonna work. I mean, these people are from a different, or these beings, things, whatever they are, they're not going to come down here and speak English or Japanese. So that's an interesting thing to think about. Another thing that I thought was interesting that I hadn't really thought of, but I guess when I go and look at it now, it's there. Angels don't sit and they don't have knees. Like, what the fuck? That's something that was pointed out, and I can't remember the reasoning why. Another thing, maybe we are machines with implants for thoughts. Now that's an interesting thing because when you think about it, we're bones and DNA and meat. Maybe something's implanted in us that gives us a consciousness or, thought or affection or anything like that. I mean, this is just wild concepts. And I'm not saying that I particularly believe all of this or this is how I view things, but it's certainly interesting to open your mind and just kind of think about. And another thing, there's two more takeaways I had so far on this. We went from water to land, if you believe that, origin story, which scientists do. Why not space next? Why is that so far-fetched? Why is it so far-fetched to think that, there are millions of people who think Jonah was swallowed by a whale, chilled down there in his stomach for a week, and came back out? Why is that accepted everywhere? But the thought that, I don't know, there may be other life in another galaxy is just so crazy, and so looked down upon. I mean, that's crazy to me. And so I think that's where Tom starts, where he says, it's really going to challenge people. And he's even talked about how his mom is a hardcore Christian and it just pushes religious boundaries that people are not comfortable with. It's like, so you think you're totally okay believing that there was a boat that had two of every animal in the entire fucking world, but to think that maybe there's life somewhere across the trillions of galaxies, like that's what sets you off. I mean, so I understand Tom's argument and viewpoint and being delicate about that. And another thing that was interesting to me is, in the grand scheme of things, a lot of people want immortality. And God, I don't know if I would or not. My fucking knees and hands are already aching up, and I'm only lower 30s. But DNA is immortal. So a lot of people wonder, why would these things come here? What do they want from us? Why do they always seem to grab us up in their spaceships, shove something up your ass, and put a microscope down your throat? What is it that they want? And part of one of the arguments in this is perhaps they are very interested in our DNA. And so one of the things that I thought was an interesting point that Peter made in that one is essentially we are walking libraries of genetic history. DNA is immortal in a sense. So what is it that people are coming here for? Well, maybe they want to learn about that. Maybe they're chasing immortality or want to see, how that works. Maybe they need that, and that's what they're trying to extract from us and take to another place. So it's an interesting conversation, for sure. I don't smoke weed anymore, but if I did, I mean, this shit would just blow my mind for a while. So that is how the To the Stars Secret Machines department is kind of working. I wanted to get people up to speed to that because I don't think either a lot of people either brush it off or they say Tom's crazy or what is he doing? And I wanted to get people up to speed on that aspect of it. Now, at the time, he was also working on what was supposed to be a documentary, and he even posted like some teasers of he was flying out to the White House and he's meeting with some of these higher up officials. I mean, he had WikiLeaks with John Podesta and shit like that. And so, it's easy to brush Tom off as being crazy. He's chasing the UFO stuff, but I do think he's getting connected and he's built a network of communication with some pretty high up people who are pretty legit. So whether you want to chalk it off as being wild or not, it's whatever. But the documentary, the short film, I don't think it's going to happen. I think that ended up being kind of used with this unidentified stuff, that kind of concept. So he just launched a unidentified, actually season 2 just came out, but he got a season of Unidentified on the History Channel, which I just said the other day, if you think Tom is crazy and he's not doing anything, go try to get a fucking channel, show on the History Channel and let me know how that turns up. I mean, that in itself is an accomplishment, in my opinion, much less on UFO stuff. So that's another section of the TTS entertainment, that type of thing. And then he, a couple years ago, launched this subsection or subsidy or, different branch of the company called To the Stars Academy. And now that is what seems to be more focused on this kind of UFO stuff, the UAP. He's hired people. I mean, he took several high up engineers. He took people who worked at the Pentagon who now work for him. I mean, their offices are at TTS in the back. They're the ones working on this unidentified stuff. They're the ones who are, supposedly working on designing anti-gravity mechanisms and stuff like that. And it's a research portion of sorts of the To the Stars umbrella. So now I think we're up to speed on at least what Tom is trying to do with this company of his. Is there anything you want to add here? I know you're pretty much an expert in this field.
So yeah, I mean, I think you did a really good job. I mean, I don't have much to say in terms of summing it up, but what people don't understand, it's from the start, it was a credible endeavor. A lot of people in the UFO community were previously unaware of Tom. Yeah, they know he's the guy in Blink-182, but they don't understand how he used to passionately hype up his projects, Blank and Angels and everything. So for them, they thought, oh, here's just another rock star, here's just another celebrity, trying to, profit off the UFO field. And I mean, I never questioned Tom's intentions, but at first, and I mentioned this, I think, in my second book, that, we weren't quite sure, though, if anyone was pulling Tom's strings, because there's been cases before where government officials use people like him for different campaigns. But since then, I kind of regret putting that in my second book, even asking that question. I mean, I did that as a good journalist, asking that question, but because everything To the Stars Academy has done since then has been incredibly legit. And I know at first people very dismissive, oh, Tom's just chasing aliens, but the team he's built at To the Stars Academy, like I said, doesn't get more legit than that. You have Hal Puthoff, who used to work as a physicist, used to work for the CIA, Jim Semivan, who was also a UFO experiencer, ex-CIA. Steve Justice used to be the head of Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, and Lou Elizondo, who used to head up the Pentagon UFO program. So those are just some of the names I named. There's other, and there's Chris Mellon, used to work for the Bush and Clinton administrations, is one of their heads of state. So it's like you have these legit people who are leaving their very secure and lucrative government jobs to go start this company, which is still very small. People don't understand how small To the Stars really is. I mean, Tom puts more money in than he gets, absolutely.
For sure.
He was leaving. I mean, what he gets paid per year to the Stars is what he was getting paid probably doing a week's worth of Blink shows.
Yeah, if that.
So this is obviously a passion project, and for people who are who are aware of how Tom, when he's passionate about something, he kind of jumps right in. And this is an incredibly legit organization. With Unidentified, like you were talking about, like how hard it is to get TV shows, and I've interviewed producers. I've been interviewed before to be on these shows, and I know how it works. Like, so many of these production companies want shows, but very few actually materialize to anything. Yeah. And this was the case where Unidentified was a legit show, and I think it does a good job of pulling in the average viewer, because that's something that at first To the Stars was criticized for, was it was basically ignoring the UFO community, because their goal from the start was mainstream. They wanted mainstream media outlets. They wanted, they didn't want the UFO crowd. They wanted to kind of move away from the fringe. Now, though, I think they're starting to throw the UFO crowd a bone. Chris Mellon gets on Twitter. He'll answer like Q&As. They have the TTSA podcast, which is really informative.
Yep.
And then even the fact that Tom giving me a quote for my book was huge to me. It was, it meant the world to me to have that in my last book. So they are aware of the UFO community, and for sure. But I think their goal from the start was to hit the mainstream people. Washington Post, New York Times, and just the average person. And Unidentified is a great show for that, because it is a credible investigation with credible witnesses, and so yeah.
Yeah, Unidentified, it is really good, and season 2 is out now. Season 1 I watched, and what's really cool about it is you're talking, basically it's about sightings or particular instances of sightings and such, and what's really cool about it is this isn't Jim Bob who saw something Bigfoot by his swamp out in the boondocks. These are trained pilots. These are, Air Force veterans, Navy SEALs, who have seen things that they cannot explain. And what's really cool is not only that, is it's not only just one person who has seen this. A lot of these are several different people reported this at the same time, and in Unidentified, they are talking to all of those different witnesses who are all saying they don't know each other. These witnesses are just saying, this is what I saw at this time, and it all lines up. So it's super, super interesting. The thing you had mentioned before about, being worried about Tom, a lot of people, what that is referred to as, that were a lot of people were worried about, is disinformation. I saw a lot of people point that out. Tom was knocking down all these doors, and Tom has came out and said that his blink status did get him in some doors, which I'm sure it would, but I don't know if it would. I don't know how many. I mean, I don't know if, Donald Trump knows Blink-182. I don't know if that's going to open up that door. But, a lot of people think that Tom got in, he was bugging people or pushing some boundaries on stuff. And so what they do in these situations, which you alluded to, that I guess has probably happened plenty of times, is people feed them disinformation to spread to keep them from either continuing this pursuit or just kind of pushing them in the other direction so that they quit exposing what they're getting close to exposing, which is interesting. One of the things that is really cool about the To the Star stuff, and I found this kind of odd when Tom mentioned it initially, is they're trying to break the stigma that comes around people who have either experienced weird things or seen UFOs, or they're embarrassed to mention it, or people think they're crazy. And when I hear him say that, I have such a hard time thinking that would be a legit thing. But when you watch Unidentified and you're talking to some of these, Air Force fighters or experienced pilots, they came out and said, oh, I wasn't going to tell anybody. It's scared to death I'd be kicked out of my squadron, lose my pension, or, be sent off somewhere else to a different department or wherever. And what's crazy is, I was talking to a buddy of mine who's a Marine who does some crazy shit. I mean, he goes undercover and does all this stuff. So he's well into kind of the government stuff. I can't even get into too much of it. I feel like Tom, and it's not like he spilled too many beans to me, but he's in deep. And I asked him about this before. I said, is this stigma thing that a lot of people feel in regards to UFOs and sightings and stuff like that? I said, do you think that's a real thing? Like, do you think people, like, would fellow Marines and such be embarrassed or scared to admit that type of thing in front of, leadership or whoever? And he said, absolutely. He said, no question. I even took this a step further with him. And I said, do you think the government is hiding things in regards to this type of thing? And he said, absolutely. So it's interesting. And so what Tom has been doing, and for people who shit on him, I mean, shit, To the Stars was front page CNN not too long ago. I've seen more UFO shit in the news in the past 4 or 5 months than I've seen in my whole life. So I hope that boundary is getting kind of broken and it's being a little bit more open. And shit, they came out and said there are flying vehicles and stuff. There's stuff in the air that we don't know what it is, and our science and whatever cannot explain, which is fucking terrifying. It should be.
If you think about the historical ramifications of what we've seen recently, so the stigma is slowly dying because you're having these people, military people who haven't signed NDAs coming, on record. And if you look at, it all started with the Tic Tac video that To the Stars was able to facilitate that release. And, for years people were saying, oh, was this real? Is Lou Elizondo, is he who he says he was? Did he really run this ATIP program? But I mean, there's validation because, the Pentagon that committed the videos are real finally. And it was funny because they dropped that, right during the pandemic, thinking it was going to be buried. And I know for a fact I don't know for a fact, but I believe they strategically released that story then because they thought it was going to fall on deaf ears, but kind of backfired. That was the most read story on CNN and all the major outlets that day. So, so what we have here is what Tom basically started the ball rolling on this is the U.S. military. I'm sorry, the Pentagon admitting that UFOs are real. Now they're not saying what they are, but just that admission itself is a form of disclosure. And the UFO community is incredibly fickle, but for them not to see that as a huge win is very short-sighted because, we haven't had anything like, I mean, for years, people who study this, we know that they know, we know that the
Yeah.
Pentagon, we know that all these people in other governments throughout the world kind of know what, not everyone, some people are read in, they know these things exist, they've seen footage, but now you actually have them admitting, basically to the general public, yes, this phenomenon is real. So what Tom started is really important. And I think people are starting to realize that, and I hate to say this, but Tom leaving Blink was something. I mean, this is bigger than Blink at the end of the day, and I hate to say that being a hardcore Blink fan. Potentially, what they're doing may end up in history books one day, and I'm not trying to over exaggerate it, but as the topic slowly goes away from the fringe, there's legit work being done, and there's more coming. Like the stuff that they have in the pipeline, once it's released, sounds really, really cool. So,
Yeah.
only good things are ahead, I think, for To the Stars for what they've accomplished.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, man. Like, and what's funny to me is like these videos literally, well, for one, I mean, try to get the Pentagon to admit that there's shit in the air that they don't know what it is. I mean, that is so fucking crazy. And Tom and this group of people he put together, they put enough pressure on them to make them admit that, which is nuts. And for two, like, how is not everybody talking about this? I mean, it's like this is fucking insane. And instead, people are like, "Oh, what's on TikTok?" Or, "Oh, look, did you see what Kanye tweeted?" I'm like, "What the fuck are you talking about? There's shit flying in the air that we have no concept of the technology that's making it maneuver the way it is, or how it got here, where the fuck it's from." And people are worried about like the stupidest shit. It blows my mind. It's pretty nuts.
Yeah, like, just the fact that like how he got his foot in the door. Like in the past, I mean, Tom has used his status, in positive ways. Like he campaigned for John Kerry years ago. He was actually out on the campaign trail doing events, and he's met with Hillary Clinton before, and so he's actually got these connections because a lot of times these older politicians, they, oh yeah, I've heard of Blink 182, like my kids listen to them or my grandkids or whatever. So early on, before To the Stars Academy even started, he was able to kind of get these meetings with these high profile people, and he was pitching basically, a way to facilitate science and unexplained to kind of the younger generation. And they listened to him and they realized, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, Tom's fan base aren't high school kids. It's dudes like us in their 30s. So I
Yeah.
don't think those guys realize that, but still just the headlines it made itself. Tom's leaving this gigantic band, one of the largest bands in the world still at that point, to kind of do this endeavor, created these kind of sensationalistic headlines. But everything they've done since then really had a lot of people kind of eating crow. And like I said earlier, the stuff he puts in his books that you mentioned, and it's like everything you were mentioning, it's like some of the Easter eggs that he's putting in the fictional books. If you're into this stuff, you're like, wow, I can't believe he's getting away with putting this. Or does Chris Mellon know he's putting this in there? Like, because a lot of these people on his team aren't traditional UFO guys.
Right.
They just kind of, they want to know the answers. Tom has been reading this stuff for years. Back when I think his first big purchase when Blink was a band was to buy a computer to look this stuff up. So
Yeah.
he's one of us, like one of us UFO people for years. So it's his wealth of knowledge on this goes way back as well. So the stuff they have in the pipeline is gonna be really interesting to see, the next couple of years. And I think people have to be patient because To the Stars is very small. Like they have big name people working for them, and they've gotten the TV show up and running, and they have all these other plans. But Tom was supposed to be making another movie this fall, directing it. I interviewed one of the producers for that, but I guess that's on hold too because of COVID. So they have all these things in the pipeline, like some of the things you're mentioning earlier, like Poet Anderson is in development for something, potentially like a TV show. Strange Times is in development. So all these fictional components are in developments too. But you look at the science side of it, they have so much stuff that they're sitting on that they're waiting to reveal the results. And there's so much, they're making an app to track data of UAP sightings. And so those are some of the things they have coming. And it's like, I think, Tom always overhypes everything, so he kind of shoots himself
Yeah.
in the foot when he says, oh, we're an aerospace company, we're going to build a spaceship. And we don't know about that yet, Tom, but it's like everything they've done since then, I think a gradual, climb. I think everything has been great that they presented so far. And just the simple fact that they're slowly breaking down the stigma. And they got somebody like Marco Rubio, who is a big name politician, I don't like Marco Rubio, but the fact that they got him on board with this getting funding in one of the budgets to study UAPs, I mean that says something, you know. And you have Mark Warner is in the I forgot which committee he's on. He's interested in this topic too now. So you're having these people, high-profile politicians, who are speaking openly about it, because in the past they didn't. They would maybe after the fact. Paul Hellyer was an ex-Canadian Defense Ministry, and he came out years after his position saying, yes, they're all real. Multiple races exist. They're on the planet now. So it's like, but in America, to have these current sitting politicians come out and say, hey, we need to get to the bottom of this. And once again, that all goes back to the work of, Tom and to the stars.
Yeah, yeah, it's really interesting, and I mean, obviously, it's what Tom is passionate about, and even Travis, and I think Mark even now would say they're in a spot where everybody's cool, everybody's doing what they want to be doing. There's no bad blood, so I just hope he keeps sprinkling a little bit of music in there. That's all we need from Tom, just a little bit of angels and airwaves in there, which he's working on it right now. So I don't have any complaints about his current workflow, but yeah, it's super interesting, man. And I back him on this stuff. I fully support really anybody doing whatever the fuck they want to do, but certainly anything they're passionate about and extremely passionate about. So, you've written books on this. You've got an entire website dedicated to this. So Mike's website is punkrockandufos.com. He's got 3 books on this. His most recent book, Stranger Than Fiction, just dropped. Tom is featured in that book in one of the chapters. So how do you get into this UFO realm to where you want to start? You're so passionate about it that you want to start, researching and writing about this on your own.
So I was always into it as a kid because I used to read comic books. I used to like sci-fi and horror movies and, playing with toys and all that stuff as a kid. And I remember my mom, because I loved reading, she would get me these Time Life books. And each month was a hardcover book. It was a new topic, and it was just 3 months back to back. It was mysterious creatures, the UFO phenomena, and like strange places. And I was hooked. And then, I was casually into this stuff. Just through the years. And then when I was working at the Eastern Chronicle, I was driving home one night and I had my first sighting, which is the traditional colored orbs, moving in these crazy directions. And then next thing you know, I started writing a book about it. And then after I wrote the book, I started the website, and then I started getting booked on, podcasts and radio and TV. Like I've shot pilots for TV shows that never really made it to anything. And so, that really started my interest even deeper, because for most people who study the stuff, it usually starts with a sighting or an experience, which is always fascinating to me, that how you get into this stuff usually is a sighting. The people who investigate it, most of the people who are quote unquote UFO investigators usually have had a sighting or an experience, which I think is very fascinating. So I started the website, and I wrote the second book, True Believers, and I gave the book to Tom when Angels and Airways played in Austin, and then the Houston show a couple months later, I asked him if he still had it, and he said, "Yeah." He's like, "I haven't read it yet, but no." He's like, "I'll look through it. I haven't had time." But he's like, "Keep up the good work." So I interviewed for my website for the book a lot of people that he's featured. Kevin Day was the key witness of the Tic Tac UFO. I interviewed him before for the book, and Peter Lavenda, obviously, who writes the Secret Machines fictional book, non-fictional books. And if you ever have any questions about that, let me know. We could talk about it off air, because it is, for someone who's not into this stuff. So the best way to describe that, not to get off topic, is basically the Secret Machines gods is the ancient astronaut theory looked at through a scholarly perspective. Best way to describe
That's
it.
the word I was looking for earlier.
Yeah.
Scholarly. It's an
And you used
extremely
it.
deep
Yeah.
and dry. It's almost like a dry, like scholarly paper. Like I almost felt like it's interesting, but I'm actually a pretty quick reader, and I can usually fly through shit. And it was like so scholarly and so deep and for people like you who are super into that, you're probably all over it. It's probably incredible, but it just took me a little bit longer to get through than it should. And honestly, so I started reading your book over the weekend. I actually think your book, for people like me, was so much of an easier read. I was flying through your book, man. I'm like 60, 70 pages in, really enjoying it.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. And that's something. So I think it's my journalism background, because when you write as a journalist, you're writing for a story, right? Or an audience. Like I'm not writing, like when I used to interview Blink, I wasn't doing fanboy interviews. I was interviewing for a specific story. So my questions had to match that. So I'm writing the books because I want them to be if someone who's into UFOs, they pick it up and they read it and they learn something. But if you're not into the UFOs or paranormal, you can relate to it. And that's basically the goal of Stranger Than Fiction, is to normalize the paranormal. And I used a lot of different pop culture analogies to try to make these connections, because you realize that fiction and nonfiction have kind of been blurred all throughout time. So thank you. That's something, I really wanted to go for with that book. And going in, I really wanted to pull from different people. Like, I interview David Marquez from DC Comics. Peter Levenda is featured in there. Leslie Keene and Ralph Blumenthal, they're the journalists who broke the New York Times stories. I got interviewed them in there. Professors, Professor Jeffrey Kreipel, he's a friend of mine. He's a professor of religious studies. Other doctors, I interviewed scientists for the book. And then, of course, the big get was getting a quote from Tom. I think that was, the right place at the right time, because that was right when Tom was doing a ton of media, like right when COVID hit. And I just caught that press person on the right day. They seemed really down for what I was doing, because I said, hey, I interview all these people, I feature all these people. I got a whole chapter basically on To the Stars and Secret Machines. And I wasn't asking for a full-blown interview. I was like, look, Tom could just email it to me, and they got it. I think Tom knocked it out of the park with his quote. So just having his involvement in my book, means the world to me. And he has a copy of it. I sent it to the office, and it's sitting on his desk apparently. Who knows if he'll get to it, but I still think it's pretty rad. And another guy, Sean Cahill, who was one of the witnesses of the Tic Tac UFO, he was on season 1 of Unidentified. He just sent me a picture the other day on Twitter of him and Lou Elizondo, and Lou Elizondo has my old book. So like that kind of blew my mind too.
That's
so
dope.
yeah, and so the purpose of the book is to kind of normalize the paranormal, and it's been done throughout time. I think when Tom announced that they were doing 2 different versions of Secret Machines, a lot of people in the UFO community were kind of like against that, because they thought they were purposely trying to blur the lines. And it's like, it's been happening forever. I mean, every pop culture franchise is rooted in either mythology, folklore, or truth. And like, let me know once you finish the Secret Machines book. We'll talk more about this, and I could basically tell you kind of where these things come from in reality. But yeah, so that was the goal of the book. And thank you for saying that it's an easy read, because you want people to be into this subject. And once they realize, if they watch Stranger Things and then they read that Montauk was a real place, or if they if they're a big fan of comic book, the Marvel films, they'll realize that Thor and Black Panther, it's part of mythologies, these ideas of gods and secret lands. Like, these are all things that previously have existed at some point in some way. And one of the points I make is, I feel like a lot of these legends never died. They just live on now through our pop culture.
Yeah. So your book, one of the things I liked at the very beginning, it's dedicated to those who are willing to let their imagination and curiosity run wild. And I thought that was just the perfect intro, because, if you sit down, just open your mind and just, throw out everything you've ever known, everything you were groomed to know growing up, and just try and think a little bit differently. Even if you just look at it as an exercise, it's just interesting. It's just wild. Like, we are such a small, insignificant little toenail in the world, in the grand scheme of things, that it's, for one, depressing to kind of think about, but it's also enlightening, because it's like, okay, there has to be some sort of bigger picture here. What is this? Why are we here? What's going on in the world? I mean, are there other places? What's our purpose here? Anything like that. And so right off the bat, chapter 1 of your book, you're getting into consciousness, which is something that's super fascinating to me, because it's almost what makes humans human to an extent, is that feeling. And that's something that scientists and doctors and everybody are trying to track down, that moment of consciousness. And when you die, what happened? I mean, does your consciousness just pop out of your brain and just float on to the next dimension, and then all of a sudden you just pop up in another world and everything's fine and you're all happy with all your loved ones? I mean, it's so interesting and just wild to grasp your head around, but you really have to challenge yourself into your thinking and what in this little world here, and just imagine. I mean, it's cool just to imagine. And so I really, enjoyed what you were doing there. The second chapter, To the Star Wars, I thought that was cool. That'll give people a deep dive into, what To the Stars is doing. That's where Tom's quote is at. Tom kind of alluded to what we were talking to earlier about how he's spreading little seeds and tidbits of information in there to kind of catch people up to where they need to be at this point in time, and what he's worked so hard to kind of do for people in this field. So it's really cool. Yeah, I'm totally looking forward to reading the rest of that. And what we're talking about is Mike's book, Stranger Than Fiction, punkrockandufos.com. Mike is also at Mike Damante on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to hit him up about any of this, feel free. We're going to be posting some cool pictures, and we'll get links to your stuff up and all that good stuff. Looking forward to it. But by the way, where can people get this book at? Is it on Amazon and everything?
Yeah, it's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble digitally. I mean, like, you get print copies of it too. Well, it's paperback. Let me rephrase that. Let me totally redo that. When I say digitally, like it's not physically in stores, but you get it on Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com. Like most books nowadays are as well. So yeah, punkrockandufos.com, Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com.
Cool. I want to back up just a tad because I'm interested. So you said you had a sighting that kind of kicked off your interest in all of this. What do you think that was that you saw?
It's crazy because like these orb sightings are just so common. Just today I posted a story. Chris Bledsoe is a famous experiencer. He's had Tom DeLonge come to his property actually. And he had NASA, CIA, they've all been there to watch these orbs. And he sent me a video and I posted it, and it's crazy. Like, you know, one of the quotes in my book, and I think it's from Professor Jeffrey Cribble, is paranormal occurrences are as common as water, something like that. I forgot the exact quote. And they really are, if you think about it. Like, even like, so I'm in Chicago right now. I'm at my in-laws' house. And the first time I ever came here, we did some, like, a boat tour in downtown Chicago. And my wife and her friends saw these orbs. I thought they were messing with me. You know, I was down on my phone. I wasn't looking. Oh, they're just messing with me. But I asked other people on the boat, and they saw it too. So I did a story on it. I interviewed people, and then like 2 months later, I get an email from someone saying, "Hey, I just read your story. I was on a flight to Michigan, flying over Lake Michigan, and I saw the same thing at the same time." So it's like these occurrences are very common, and it's like. I teach full time, and I've done like little seminars, like for my other teachers about UFOs and stuff. And so many people come forward. Oh man, I had a sighting too. I saw this, and I had someone come to me once that says she's been abducted. So it's like people have these experiences all the time. Yeah, it's really not as uncommon as people think. It just, you feel like when you see it, obviously you feel really cool, and then you know some people, like I said, get triggered, I guess, to then investigate it on their own.
So these orbs, I mean, are they just like pieces of light reflection, or do you think they're vehicles? Like, what are? I think I've seen videos of these, but what do people think they are?
I mean, anything from UFOs, light beings, souls, like you name it. I mean, I've heard it all.
Oh, souls would be crazy, man.
That
reminds me of Poet Anderson. There's a particular set of characters in there where their souls like float outside of their body with the inside these little orbs. That kind of reminded me of that. That's fucking crazy.
And Tom puts a lot of the consciousness stuff in those Poet Anderson books for sure. I was actually speaking to, I was doing a podcast with a guy named Chris Cogswell, who's a scientist. He's like a genius. And he told me like he's always into like sleep stuff. And I was like, dude, you should totally read the Poet Anderson, because he's like a kind of a to the stars skeptic at first. But I was like, man, it's funny you say that, because Tom wrote 2 books about dreams. But it's, you know, the more you read about this stuff, the more you realize that it's all the same phenomena. What it is, we don't know, but it's somehow all connected. And that's what, you know, I think a lot of us are trying to do in our own studies, is try to, you know, say, hey, this is somehow all connected. And it's really not that weird when you break it down. Because if you look at, you know, religious texts and mythology and, you know, just recorded history through time, it's all there. It's all there, you know, just written differently.
Yeah. The Poet Anderson stuff. So for people who haven't read that or don't know anything about it, it is actually a really fascinating story. It's basically, you know, when you go to sleep, you kind of wake up in this dream world and you're living like an alternate life there, and shit happens there. And some of that stuff can affect what happens in the quote unquote real world, your real life. So it's an interesting concept. You know, I mean, sleeping and dreaming and all of that is just so weird. Like, a lot of people think that's a different dimension or an alternate reality and stuff like that. Gosh, we don't know shit about ourselves. I guarantee it. One thing that's going to be interesting about Tom's app. So you mentioned how you saw something, a dude in the air flying saw something, your girlfriend saw something. One of the things that Tom wants to accomplish with his app, which I think is going to be fucking dope, is it's going to let people input when they see stuff and then track that. So if I have a sighting, I can pop up on my little To the Stars app and instantly say, boom, this is what it was coming in from the north. It was, half a mile long in diameter or whatever. And then someone 5 miles away could pop open the app and do the same thing, give a little bit more credibility, kind of plot these, where they're popping up, how long, how big. So I'm actually looking forward to that more than a lot of his stuff, to be honest. I think the data they're going to get from that is going to be pretty dope.
Absolutely. The fact that you'll be able to kind of triangulate, what is there anything around in the sky at the moment? So you could rule out, well, there's no plane, so it's not a plane. And I think that's a really important aspect of it too, is to not misidentify it. So you actually you can determine, is this something unidentified or not? So I think that's a cool aspect of it.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get weird with some alien questions, and then I'm going to hit you with some rapid fire, and then I think that's all I got for you, man. So first and foremost, are aliens real? Do aliens exist?
Absolutely, for sure. I think the more you study this stuff, you not only realize that they're real, but other phenomena is real too. Stuff that you would, like 10 years ago, I would have thought a lot of the stuff was, fairy tale or new age nonsense. But just the more you read up and open your mind, you'll see how ufology itself is going more towards the consciousness, and a lot of the scientists and are kind of going towards that too. So I think it's pretty cool that these things are being studied by legit people.
Do you think they exist more in like a physical form, big green goblin, or more of like the consciousness aspect?
I think they exist physically, but the communication is made through our consciousness. One of the things that I kind of mentioned in my book that I theorize is that our consciousness is our key to these other worlds and universes. People who've done studies, near-death experiences, and DMT, which is a drug that releases this natural phenomenon that basically recreates a near-death experience. It's all the same phenomena as a abduction experience too. So there's something there. I think so. All these people who are sending out, like SETI sends out all these signals to space. I think they're barking up the wrong tree. I mean, you're not going to get any contact that way. And it's all through our consciousness.
Yeah. Do you think aliens have been here?
Yeah, that's the ancient astronaut theory is something I was a big fan of back in the day. Now I kind of pulled from it a little bit just because the TV show is good, but it's also at the same time it's very sensationalistic. But the theory itself, I think, is legit, and I think Peter Levenda does a really good job of reining in the people who came up with the theory, because they kind of got carried away, where it was like everything is aliens. But what Zachariah Sitchin and Eric Von Daniken came up with, Peter Levenda did a really good job of, in Gods, Secret Machines, Gods, of giving it more of a credible. He was breathing a new credible life into that argument. So yes, I believe they have been.
Yeah, one of Tom's quotes, he told the story, and I can't remember who he was talking to, but he said he was talking to somebody, and they said, we either got or we saw a life form. Do you think the government has a life form?
It's hard. So one of the best books on the topic is called The Day After Roswell. It's by Philip Corso, and he was a former Pentagon official. And his claim this is what he claims, that his job after Roswell was to take the crash material and disseminate it to private companies. And that's how we have so many technological advances from, when Roswell happened to the 60s, that 10, 15-year span, we had just a boom. So that's something a lot of people in ufology believe. I believe it. I think So the Stars is trying to do that themselves now, because they apparently have some material that they've been testing. So I think they're trying to eventually do that in terms of reverse engineering. And even in the Secret Machines fictional book, you mentioned they have a guy trying to reverse engineer and fly a TRB-3. I mean, you could say, well, that's kind of like Bob Lazar. Bob Lazar's story is he's another controversial figure who claims he was in a UFO and his job was to reverse engineer it too. So, yeah.
Yeah, Bob Lazar's story is super interesting. I mean, of all the stuff that is kind of out there, that's one of the ones that's came across on my radar a couple times. And I can't remember if I think I watched something on Netflix somewhat recently about him. It was either Netflix or Prime or one of them. But yeah, that dude's story is interesting for those of you who are interested. I mean, basically, he was plucked away and told to reverse engineer a crashed vehicle that they didn't know what the hell it was. And I mean, this dude's passed lie detectors tests. He has nothing to hide. He's just came out and said it just for disclosure, which is super interesting. Okay, for people who get abducted when they, have these stories about they come here, what do you think if in these stories, what do you think the aliens or other life beings, what do you think they want? Why is it always like a weird abduction where they want inside our bodies somehow?
Yeah, it's weird. A lot of people believe, and there's a book called American Cosmic by Diana Pasulka, which really talks about this, that our DNA is the transmitter. Our bodies, our consciousness is somehow connected. So that's why a lot of these phenomena happens through our consciousness, and it's a traumatic experience. So we kind of block them out, and the only way we remember them mostly is through like regression therapy and hypnosis. And gosh, some of these cases are just so fascinating, the stuff you see, and you see these commonalities in these people who have the same experience or similar experiences, and it happens throughout time. You read it in mythology, you read it in biblical texts that these people are having these things that could be representing, angelic experiences of angels flying down in their sleep and pulling them up, and you hear about that, and it's the same thing as a UFO abduction. So it's just crazy how this all kind of happens in our consciousness. And I mean, you hear people who say that that they've been warned about the impending doom and how we need to take better care of the environment, and they're shown apocalyptic images. And you hear other people who claim that they've had sexual encounters. And I mean, this all sounds crazy, but I mean, there's something there, and I don't think these people are crazy at all, because the stuff that they're saying has been reported throughout time. And there's people I know who are credible people who work for large institutions who've had these things happen to them. And, they're not a fear of losing their job over this, because this is what they believe.
Yeah, it sucks that it's always traumatic. Like, I wish one of them would just be like, oh, they just wanted to play video games and listen to Blink. Like, it's always like, I woke up 2 hours later and I couldn't remember anything, but I vaguely remember something going down my throat and a bright light and a weird person next to me. It's like, oh gosh, I don't know why they're so mean, but yeah, I don't know. It's super interesting, man. I mean, I'm glad we had this chat and are able to talk about it. And I encourage anybody who's into this type of thing to for sure hit you up, because clearly you know your shit on this. I don't. I'm gonna finish reading Man. I'm gonna finish reading your book, and then we'll have to reconvene on some of this stuff, because it's fascinating, man. I'd love to just smash a couple beers and talk about it sometime. It's fucking crazy.
Dude, anytime. I love talking about this stuff, especially with people who are new to it too. Like, there's so many questions, like I would have too. So absolutely.
I know. It's like when I tell people about Blink, they're like, oh, what's up with that Blink-182 band? I'm like, oh, well, they started back in the day. They broke up at this time. The lead singer left and went and played with this band. Then they got back together, and then they broke off and did this. And that's, dude, it's just crazy. My wife could kill me. She knows the whole story of Blink, like probably more than most Blink fans, to be honest. All right, dude. Well, I'm going to hit you with some rapid fire and then get you out of here. This has been great. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really stoked for the rapid fire part. So,
all right, there's not too many, but just a couple that we need to know. Okay, I think I already know this. Favorite Blink album?
Dude Ranch. So I'll rank them real quick for you.
Okay.
Dude Ranch, Untitled, Enema, Neighborhoods. Yes, Neighborhoods number 4.
Okay.
Take off your pants and jacket. Cheshire Cat. Buddha, California. No, 9, California.
Okay. All right. That's probably, I mean, for a lot of like old school fans, like if you got into Blink with Cheshire and stuff, then that's probably what I figured a lot of people's countdown or rundown would be. Favorite Blink song all time?
Oh man. So I would say, like, in terms of like the song that I think encompasses them, like their energy, their personality, I think Josie. That's a song that when they play, I always go off on. But I think their best song, not my favorite, I think Carousel is the best song they've ever written. And it's pretty interesting that that's the first song they've ever written.
It really is.
Just because, like, I mean, the lyrics are, I mean, back then, God, their lyrics on Cheshire and Dude Ranch were very introspective. And it almost feels like they kind of went a little bit backwards after that lyrically. But yeah, Carousel, man, I think Carousel is genius. Like the bass line is insane. Like it's fast. It's like it's Tom's voice is like snotty, and it's the lyrics are great too. So yeah, I think Carousel is their best song. Josie's probably my favorite.
Okay. Yeah, I just got a bass not too long ago. I've been trying to put together some of my own music, and for years I'm like, I need a bass player, I need a bass player, and finally I'm like, fuck it, I'll play my own bass. So I got one, and the first fucking thing I did was learn how to play at least most of the intro to Carousel, and it's just so rad to do 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 do. It's fun to play.
Dude, that's
Okay.
impressive. I've been playing bass for years, and I can't even touch that. So
Well, I don't play the whole song, but I can nail the intro. It's pretty fun. Okay, favorite collectible. I think we already touched on this too. I think I know it.
oh man, yeah. So probably, I mean, Mark's bass. Mark's bass is really rad. So I sold a lot. I've sold a lot of my collection through the years because you need money, like posters. Like I used to collect posters for every show I went to. I sold a lot of those, but Mark's bass. One poster I have is the poster from Wide Amplified, Tom's last show.
Mm,
It's like a anime, and it's like a anime girl beheading a bunny. And I thought that was pretty
okay.
symbolic because it's like Tom's last show. It was almost like
Oh
killing
shit.
the past. Like that's like
That
so that's
is.
one poster I probably would get rid of. But yeah, that the Mark Space, and I'm trying to think what else. Blue wise, I have that I really like. I don't know. I'm drawing a blank right now. Probably like
I
it's
mean,
weird.
Mark.
Like yeah, Mark's Bay is number one, but all the photos I have of from meeting the band through the years, I've printed out. I mean, if there was a fire in my house, I'll probably grab that over like a T-shirt or something, even though they could
Yeah.
be reprinted. As dumb as that sounds, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, a fucking bass that Mark played and handed you from the stage. Jesus, I'd grab that bitch and run like hell out of a fire. All right, man. Last question. So, what would you say to either people who think, believers in this phenomena or crazy or Tom is crazy? Like, what would be your advice or word to them in regards to that?
I mean, just not only open up your mind, but read some of it for yourself. Form your own opinion. The stigma is changing. Yeah, I mean, basically that's it. Just open up your mind, and like I said, for a lot of the Blink fans who were really sour on Tom at first, it's like think about it. We're Tom's doing his thing, but we're getting so much Blink content. Blink's going forward with Matt. Tom's doing his thing with Angels and Airwaves. So it's like you're almost, and I mean, Tom still has a stake in Blink, and so you kind of it's almost like you have two Blink franchises at the same time because even though Tom's not in the band, he's still uniquely Blink, if that makes sense. So it's like don't hate
Yeah.
him, just support what he's doing.
Yeah, dude, the past 5 years, just from a content standpoint, have been absolutely
Yeah.
nuts. I mean, three Blink albums, multiple huge tours. We got a new trio album. We've got Angels and Airwave stuff. They toured for the first time. Mark started the side band, Simple Creatures. I mean, the past 5 years, I mean, love it or hate it, I've had so many great times, and it's just so fucking dope to have content from these dudes because, I mean, honestly, if Tom was in Blink, we probably wouldn't have much. We might have like an EP at most, but especially with kicking off the To the Stars stuff and where he's at. And the thing is like he doesn't. It's not what he's passionate about right now, so I wouldn't want him to do it anyway. I don't want anything to be a burden, so I really do like where we're at, and I'm super stoked for New Angels and Airwaves. Super stoked for anything To the Stars does and accomplishes, and then of course super stoked and supportive of everything going on in the Blink world. So it's a great time, man. I just hope we get fucking concerts back at some point
Yeah.
soon. I don't know when the hell it's going to happen. So, all right, dude, this has been a pleasure. Is there anything you need to say to anybody to wrap it up? Tell people where to find you and such?
No, man. Like I said, punk rock and UFOs, and some of my old articles for the Houston Chronicle. I think if you search like chron.com and my name, they'll pop up, and I think you're going to post some of those as well. And the book Punk Rock and UFOs: Stranger Than Fiction. It's on Amazon.com and Barnes and Noble. Thank you again for having me. Like I said, I've been waiting to do this for a long time. I'm just you get kind of get tired of going on shows just talking about UFOs, so I get to talk about UFOs and Blink, two of my
Oh,
favorite
fuck
things.
yeah.
So I appreciate that. Thank you for making this happen, man. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. No problem. That was Mike Damante. Make sure you check out his book, Stranger Than Fiction, available on Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, also punkrockandufos.com. And if you need to hit him up, he is at Mike Damante. This was dope, dude. Appreciate your time.